Ever since my father married my stepmother, my life turned into a nightmare. She had a coldness in her eyes, and her smile always seemed forced, as if she was hiding something beneath it. From the moment she stepped foot into our home, I knew things would never be the same. At first, I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. I hoped that maybe, just maybe, she would be kind and loving like a mother should be. But those hopes were quickly shattered. She treated me like crap, constantly finding ways to belittle and criticize me. Whether it was about my appearance, my grades, or my hobbies, she never missed an opportunity to make me feel small. As the years went by, her cruelty escalated. She would make up chores for me to do, piling on tasks that were impossible to complete in a day. And if I didn't finish them to her satisfaction, she would punish me by taking away my privileges or locking me in my room for hours on end. But the worst part of it all was the emotional manipulation. She knew exactly how to play mind games, making me question my worth and sanity. Gaslighting became a common occurrence, with her twisting the truth and making me doubt my own memories and perceptions. She would also tell me that my mom didn't love me and that's why she was on drugs. For a long time, I wished my father would get involved to see the truth of what was happening. But he was blind to who she truly was and completely unaware of the pain she was causing me. It felt as if I had been abandoned, trapped in a house with a woman who was determined to break me. After high school, I decided to move out. I had saved up enough money to be able to afford an apartment with my best friend. And then, the day finally arrived, my bags were packed, and I was ready to finally leave. I heard a knock on my bedroom door, and when I opened the door, the police were standing there. My stepmother had called the police on me and made up a lie, telling them that I had threatened to stab her with a knife. I was in shock and told them that what she said wasn't true. The police believed her, and just like that, I was getting hauled off to jail. While I was in jail for the night, she had gone through my belongings and stolen over $4,000 of money I had saved up. It took me years to save that money. My father, who wasn't home at the time of the incident, had learned about it and immediately took her side. Due to the restraining order, I was only allowed to return to get my belongings, but couldn't live in the house anymore. I ended up in a shelter where I lived for 7 months until I was able to afford to leave. I found out that after I had left, she did the same thing to my father, causing him to lose access to the home that he worked so hard to pay for. He was put out just like me and still had paid the bills there. They finally divorced, and my father has been trying to reach out to repair our relationship, but I haven't been able to forgive him. To this day, I can never understand why she was so mean, but I just accepted that that's just who she is. Thanks for listening to my story. Stay spooked.
It all started when my father introduced me to his new girlfriend, who we will call Olivia. By the way, my dad was still legally married to my mom, but they had been separated for over 10 years at that point. Just a little backstory: my parents split because my dad was a cheater and would often be out entertaining other women while my mom was home with me cooking or cleaning. Nonetheless, my dad was a great provider who gave my mom and me a nice life. He still supported my mom financially because she never really worked. Sometimes she would make jewelry online and sell them, but it was never really enough to make ends meet. When Olivia started coming around, I was about 13 years old. She seemed cool at first and was the total opposite of my mom. She was a lot younger. She felt more like an older sister to me than a mother figure, even though she also had a daughter who was 3 years old. In the beginning, Olivia tried to get really close to me. She would ask me if I had a boyfriend and things like that. I would tell her if I liked a boy at school, and she would give me advice. After some time, Olivia's behavior towards me changed. When I would confide in her about things, she would tell my dad and he would question me about it. I started to withdraw and not talk to her as much. She started becoming nasty towards me. She would make rude comments about my mom calling her lazy and criticizing my dad for supporting my mother financially. I didn't want to start a fight, so I never told my parents. I would always hear Olivia and my dad argue about the future of their relationship. She wanted to get married, and my dad didn't want to be married again. Once, I overheard my father telling Olivia that he had no plans on divorcing my mom because he wanted to make sure that if anything happened to him, my mom and me would be taken care of. She was so angry she started yelling and she left the house, and I didn't see her for a few days. On some of the days I was at my mom's house, I would see a car looking like Olivia's car parked across the street. Again, I didn't want to start an argument, so I would just ignore it. One day, we had just come home from the mall and my mom was in the kitchen cooking dinner. I saw Olivia's car in our driveway. She got out of the car and walked up to our front door and rang the bell. Before I could open the door, my mom had walked from the kitchen and beat me to it. My mom had never met her before, and when she opened the door, she asked Olivia how she could help her. Olivia ignored my mom and looked directly at me as I stood next to my mom. She said, "Hey sweetie, you left this at your dad's house, and I thought you might need it," she said, handing me my journal. My face turned red immediately because I didn't know if she had read all of the nasty things I wrote about her. She had a smirk on her face and didn't wait for me to respond. She walked away. After she left, my mom called my dad to tell him what had happened. My father was defensive and told my mom that Olivia was harmless and just thought I might need my journal. My mom was very soft-spoken and didn't like to argue, so she let it go. Instead, she consoled me when she saw how upset I was. The next day, Olivia showed up at the house again. This time she was friendlier and greeted my mom with a smile. She had brought over a pie that she baked as a peace offering and wanted to apologize for her behavior the day before. She said that since she hoped to become a part of our family, she wanted us to all get along. It was as if she wanted to send us a message or something. After Olivia left, my mom commented on how sweet she was, and I couldn't believe it. All it took was Olivia baking a pie for my mom to fall for her fakeness. My mom cut a piece of pie and took a bite. She was surprised at how delicious it was. About a half hour later, she started feeling sick. She was throwing up and had broken into a sweat. I grabbed the phone and called my dad, who rushed over immediately with Olivia, of course. He drove my mom to the hospital despite Olivia trying to convince him that my mom probably just caught a stomach bug or something. After my mom's test results came back, the doctor found that my mom had been poisoned. Together, we confronted Olivia and let her know that we knew what she had done. Her mask of innocence crumbled, and she was enraged. She lashed out, hurling accusations and threats, attempting to defend herself. I looked at my father, and he was fueled by a mix of guilt and anger, made the difficult decision to separate from Olivia and stand by my mom's side. That night, Olivia was arrested, and we were able to obtain restraining orders. It seemed like she wanted to take my mother out because of my father's refusal to divorce my mother. She wanted him all to herself, and that's the only way she knew she could have him to herself. I can't help but wonder, if she was successful in harming my mother, I could have been next on her list. Ultimately, she was convicted and sentenced for her crime. My mother began the slow process of healing, surrounded by a support system of friends and family who stood by her side. As for my father and me, we became even closer, our bond fortified by the shared experience of survival and the commitment to protect one another.
So, The story I'm about to tell you isn't about an actual stepmother, but it was a woman my father had proposed to and was planning on marrying. It all began when my father, a widower longing for companionship, met a woman who we will call Evelyn. When my siblings and I first met Evelyn, our impression of her was that she was charming and beautiful. We could see why my father fell in love with her. As his children, we wanted nothing more than to see our father happy again and get back to the person he was before our mother's passing. But as the weeks went by, doubts began to creep into our minds. Let's start with the fact that my father seemed to be spending a lot of money on her. He paid more than $40,000 to renovate our family home so she could move in and be comfortable. I'll admit, the house we grew up in wasn't fancy or anything and could have used a few updates, but not $40,000 worth of updates. Once she moved in, she took less hours at the hospital where she worked as a nurse. She would sit around all day and entertain her friends in the house while my father was at work meeting with clients. I should mention my father was a real estate broker who had been self-employed at that point for more than 40 years, and he was in his early 70s and approaching retirement. Evelyn was in her mid-50s and had no children. She once told my sister and I that she never wanted kids because she didn't want to be tied down. That was a major red flag, because if she didn't want to be tied down with kids, we wondered why she wanted to be tied down with a man who was significantly older than her. It just didn't make sense to us. Our father was sharp for his age, but their age difference showed when she would want to go traveling and he would prefer to stay home for example. In addition to cutting her hours at work, she would frequently ask about my father's financial situation, inquiring about his assets and investments. At first, I dismissed it as harmless curiosity, but as time went on, her intentions became clear. One evening, while Evelyn was away on weekend trip with her friends, my father invited my siblings and I over for dinner to catch up. During dinner, he told us how much he loved Evelyn and wanted to marry her within the next few weeks. My brother cut right to the chase and asked our father if he had planned to make Evelyn sign a prenup. Our father was slightly offended and told us that prenups were for people in doubt and that there was no doubt in his mind that he trusted Evelyn and wanted to marry her. I couldn't believe that my father, who was a very intelligent and business-savvy man, would enter a second marriage as a financially fortunate man without a prenup. We didn't want to upset our father, so we changed the subject. I had always been curious about Evelyn and decided to dig deeper that night, so on my way to the restroom, I stopped into the small library that my father had built for Evelyn. The library had all her favorite novels, which were mostly murder mysteries. In the library there was a small desk and a computer. I opened the desk drawer and I stumbled upon a series of incriminating documents hidden in Evelyn's desk. There was a life insurance policy with my father named as the insured and Evelyn as the sole beneficiary. We found a copy of the deed for the house and Evelyn was named as a co-owner. I pretty much concluded that she had a scheme to marry my father and then orchestrate his demise for the insurance money. I was so afraid for my father after I realized the danger he unknowingly faced. I felt a sudden responsibility to protect my father. I picked up the papers and walked to the living room where my father and siblings were sitting, and I confronted my father. At first, he was skeptical, unwilling to believe the betrayal that lay before him. But as I showed him the life insurance policy and the deed to the house, his eyes widened in shock and disbelief. The truth became unavoidable. The proof was there, revealing Evelyn's true intentions. My father wasn't aware of the life insurance policy, nor was he aware of her forging his signature to add her name to the deed. The following day, my siblings and I decided to consult with a lawyer who happened to also be a family friend. We reported Evelyn's plan to the authorities. It was a long process to get Evelyn removed from our family home and to get justice, but justice was finally served. I'll spare you guys the details of the court process, but let's just say I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy. During this time, my father became increasingly guarded. His trust was completely shattered by this evil woman. It was painful to witness the toll it took on him, knowing that he had almost fallen victim to her wicked plans. If you have elderly parents, Be careful who is around them because there's unfortunately people who prey on the most vulnerable. Stay spooked.